Hello, everybody. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show. And today's guest, you guys gonna love him because, oh my God, he's just like me. And you guys gonna meet him right after this. Hello again. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show, and I'm really excited of today's guest because as I started talking to him, it reminded me of me because grew up in the hotel industry. His parents owned a place and he actually lived there. We guys need to have a conversation around that. He is a podcaster, so he's a fellow podcaster, and he's an amazing human being. Not only does he do all of that, he has a public speaking business. So he public speaks out there. He is approached by salespeople to teaching them how to sell product out there. And you guys gonna know a little bit more about him right after this. So with that, Mr. Glenn Poulos, welcome to the Disruptive Chef Show.
Hi, Christian. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm really excited about this conversation. So you're a podcaster. You grew up in the hotel industry. You teaching people how to sell. You're a speaker. I mean, what haven't you done? So please tell everybody, give everybody the 5-minute cliff note, who Glenn Poulos is and how he came to be.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, I haven't climbed any mountains yet, so that's something I haven't done. Not sure I ever will, but yeah.
It's not a healthy thing.
I grew up in the hotel motel business in Niagara Falls, of all places, the honeymoon capital of the world, and got used to serving customers from a very young age, and so hospitality and customer service was sort of, let's say it's in my DNA, right? And then, as my years wore on, I also started falling in love with gizmos and gadgets and electronics of various flavors. This is starting back of course, I was born in the 60s, teenager in the 70s, so I went to school for electronics, became an electronic technician of all things, and my boss suggested that I quit and that I was in the wrong job and that I would be better placed as a salesman. And I'm not sure what I ever said to him back then. I can't remember, but I took him on his word, and I quit my job as a federal civil servant in the Canadian government, and I got a job at a small sales company. And essentially what happened, I worked for them for about 5 years. And I learned had some really good mentors and to follow, and learned some really good things about customers. And in 1991, I started my first business, which I ran for 15 years, and I exited that 15 years later in the early 2000s, which allowed me another opportunity to start another business, which in 2007, which I ran for another 15 years, so 15 and 15, and I sold it to a private equity. Yeah. And then I did my sort of 3-year stint with them, which expired on New Year's Eve a couple weeks ago. And in anticipation of that, I bought a third business in Florida, so I could, as I called it, snowbird. And now I'm starting all over again at square one for a third time. After 2 successful exits, and because I like being busy. I love building businesses, and I love the time when it's small and growing, and that sort of takes me from 1985 when I came into sales until today when now I'm living in Florida and starting a new business. So.
I absolutely love the story. And if people, and I encourage our listeners to kind of follow you a little bit, because one of the messages you have is that sales is within you. And it's really difficult to learn because it is something you do and it's something you are. So talk to us a little bit. How was that conversation, first of all, where they said, hey, I think you're in the wrong industry. You need to sell. And how do you make that pivot as a salesperson? So first of all, it's not easy. And a lot of our listeners are chefs, hospitality professionals, and entrepreneurs, which are in the very same shoes you are. So I think this conversation would guide them and help them a little bit and kind of evolving and kind of developing that. So how was it for you hearing, hey, I think you're in the wrong business. And how did you kind of grow and being as successful as you are in the sales industry?
Yeah. So at first I didn't, I applied for jobs, right? And my center of reference was working for the Canadian government, right? In the Environment Canada, the weather service, right? And as I tell people, I used to drive around in in 1980, imagine the crappiest car out there. It was like a Chrysler. It wasn't a K car, but it was this small, tiny little car. It had crank windows, had no air conditioning, had no radio. It was the most base car, and it was government green at the time. Now Canada's colors have changed, and I never
Um,
thought much of it. And I drove around and I did it. And when I applied for the first sales job, the owner, I went and talked to him, and he said, "You know what? We're gonna send you to Montreal to meet my other partners as a final interview, right?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so I fly to Montreal, and the guy says, "Oh, I'm going to pick you up at the airport." And so I took some time off work, flew to Montreal, and lo and behold, the guy came to the airport, met me, and we walked out to his car, and he had a BMW 750. And I'd never even been in a car like this before. And I'm like, "Oh my God, look at this car." Right. And he drove me to their office where there were four partners, three of them were in Quebec and in Montreal. And he pulled into his spot. And in the other two spots beside him were two other matching BMW 750s. And the license plates were one digit apart. And I'm like, "Oh my God, hey, if I join this company, I'm going to get a BMW 750, right?" So it was like this huge mental shift of like, "Oh my God, I can go from driving in a K car or whatever to and it was a totally different world. And I'm like, I'm definitely getting a job in sales, no matter what. Like, I just have to, right? And lo and behold, the interview did go well. And they didn't assign me a BMW on my first day, let me tell you. But they did hire me. And and that's kind of where the learning and the change began. And I'm happy to share some of those stories if you want.
yep.
But but it was really the promise of being able to at the government. I could feel this. I kind of knew exactly where I was going. That I had this level. I was in EL4, right?
Yep.
Electronic engineering technician level 4. I knew I would probably, if I was lucky, I'd get to a 6, a 5, probably for sure over my 30-year career. If I got to a 6, I could go to the chart. I could look at the 7 bands of pay, and I knew exactly, plus or minus the cost of living or whatever, exactly how much money I was going to make 30 years from now when I retired, and figure out my pension, right? And but when I saw the sales, I realized that there was just so much more flexibility in terms of how much you can
Yeah.
do and make, right? And you're not limited by salary bands and collective agreements or anything like that. You're just limited by how hard you're willing to work, right? And that appealed to me. And I come from a Greek background, and I think that's in our DNA to want to start businesses and stuff for some reason. And my parents did it, my grandparents did it, and so it's just something I really wanted to do was start working more for myself, and this seemed like a good stepping stone. So
I love that. So let's go back very start. You said you have 30 plus years in sales. You have grown and successful companies like Gap Wireless. So talk to us a little bit about
yeah.
Gap Wireless.
Yeah, so Gap Wireless was my second company, and I started in 2007. And I had another company which I had sold, and I had learned a lot of lessons. And I realized that some of the things we didn't get quite right, and especially as it related to customer service. And and one of the things I always share about is, how to be a pleasure to do business with always, right? And so I
Mhm,
wanted to
mhm.
build this company, technology business, focused in telecom, that that put the customer first, and where customers would want to come back and work with us.
Mhm.
And so that was sort of the genesis of the business. And that's what I started, and the mantra and that was part of the core values of the company. So everyone we hired, fired, motivated, rewarded, everything based on on how you treated customers and how you adhered to the core values of the company. And as I've said, we had competitors that were equally, a little better, a little worse than us in the market or whatever, but nonetheless successful. And, they had a different way of doing it, but they weren't a pleasure to do business with, right? Like that was something that was true. The customers always said it. And it was something that we lived, right? And it was always important to me. And it's something you have to build from the ground up. How do you answer the phone? Is there a live person? What happens when, if you do or don't know the information, what do you do, right? And so for me, it's all about the customer experience. And, doesn't always mean, you're going to win the business or that you're going to be the most profitable in all situations. But it's something that that's tangible, that people can relate to. And, it just came natural to me from having served customers back, in the 70s when I lived in a motel. So,
I mean, I absolutely love that because, and now it doesn't matter if you are in the kitchen, if you're in the front of the house, what he just said is exactly what needs to happen. Customers need to be number one. They need to know that they're being taken care of, and they need to know that you treat them differently. So absolutely, I absolutely love that. So you in this business, you sold a business. You also manage big teams. So talk to us a little bit about what are some effective way of motivating, your team. And by that, I just not mean people you have working for you, because in sales is also other people. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about, and shameless plug for my book, right? But in my book, I talk a lot about empathy and learning and practicing empathy, and learning the difference between empathy, sympathy, and compassion, what the differences are, and how and when to apply them, right? And so what I mean in short is, like, when someone comes to me, I have to try to stop what I'm doing, put my keyboard away for a minute, right? Close my screens and really listen to them. And then I need to actually put myself in their shoes, right? Because a lot of times they're telling you a problem, and, you give them these sort of, pat answers, right? Which are basically, what can I say that sounds like I care, but will get them out of my office, and I can get back to what I was doing before, right? And that is not really showing or practicing any empathy, right? When you say, hey, when the person says, this has occurred or this is occurring, and I have to think, well, they're 30 years younger than me, they've got 2 kids under 5, like how does that relate to their particular situation, right? And so I always try to see, and put myself in their shoes. How's it affecting them, and what is a more appropriate response based on that, right? And not, this too shall pass, or don't worry, it'll everything will work itself out, or those kinds of things, right? That when you say sometimes to your wife and she wants to kill you for not listening, right? And so, yeah. And one small little trick I learned, which is that, in most people's office, the boss kind of has a chair in his desk, and then on the other side of his desk, he has one or two chairs for staff to come in, right? I got rid of those 2 chairs, and I moved them beside my desk. And so when someone needs to come and talk to me, they actually have to come around to my side of the desk, and they can see my screens. And they can see my screens, and we actually have to turn each other and have our bodies sort of facing each other and all exposed. We don't have the privacy panel from the desk. And you wouldn't believe the impact that has on people, on breaking down barriers, right? And so I love doing that. And just don't give them a chair that's isolated by a desk. Only provide a chair that's sitting right beside you. Obviously I close my screens and stuff, but yeah.
I love that. So you had the successful book out there called Never Sit in a Lobby. Does that have anything to do with me sitting next to you?
No, the never sit in the lobby means, like, don't be sitting down playing on your phone, because when your client walks in and you got to look up at them and you're like playing on the phone, texting your wife about the milk and bread you got to pick up, or, chatting with a friend, right? You want to be standing at attention, waiting for the client to show up. And when they walk in the lobby to meet you, you want to shake their hand, say hello, and always have something in your hand and something in your mind that you want to talk to the customer about, right?
I,
Like, don't
I love
be,
that.
yeah, yeah. So
I,
these are little rules that
So
I
listen,
follow, right?
absolutely, I love that because if you are a bartender or you sit behind the bar, do you listen to what he just said? Go back 2 minutes and don't be on the phone because I think there's nothing worse in our industry than going up to somebody because you feel like you interrupted or you don't really belong to be there. So be available for your customer all the time. I absolutely love that. So I want to switch
Yeah,
gears a little bit. So
sure.
you wrote a book. You're in sales for 30 years. So you're going into speaking. So talk to us a little bit about how did that speaking career come? And if our clients listen, and our the audience here, let us kind of go deep a little bit. How did you get into speaking?
Yeah, so it was, in a way, it was, I think, no, maybe a little overused word right now, kind of organic, but it was quite natural in the sense that I quit the job and I went into sales, right? And then when I went into
Mhm.
sales, then I had these I was lucky enough to be working for these BMW driver guys that were very good salespeople, and they really practiced what they preached, and they followed a lot of like processes and procedures, and I noticed that they were doing the same things over and over again,
Mhm.
and they were getting the same results, right? Sort of the opposite of the insanity thing, right? They want the same results, so they keep doing it over and over again, right? And so I started writing the rules down and giving them a name, right? And naming them after the people that I learned them. And a lot of times then I would also try to figure out a funny way of telling the story behind the rule, right? And so I'd share these
Mhm.
rules with other salespeople and in other places, and then these salesmen I worked with, and then other salespeople would hear me, and I'd tell them, "Oh, that reminds me of this rule and that rule," and they're like, they would, sometimes they would have a laugh or whatever, and then they started saying, "Hey, can you come to my sales meeting and share like some of these rules with my team?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Right? So I started going back in the late 80s and early 90s. I started going to companies and sharing my rules. I called them factors at the time, and several big companies, one of which was Hewlett Packard. Right? They
Mhm.
would invite me to their national sales meeting. This was in Canada, and believe it or not, they would. The topic that I would usually speak on was how to be a salesman when you don't work for HP, right? Because these guys didn't know what it was like. They didn't even realize that salesmen other than HP existed. They thought there's other salespeople. I thought everybody just bought HP, and so then they started saying, "Hey, you should write a book and this and that." And I never did write the book until much, much later. But so over time, just through word of mouth, and I started doing this. And then it wasn't a consistent, iteration throughout the years because growing these businesses and what have you. But later on, I sort of repeated the process and kind of got back out there. And when the pandemic hit, that's when I started writing the book. And I had nothing to do, stuck at home, and then the book came out as the pandemic was ending, and that's when I started to want to have a resurgence of getting back in front of these customers. And by then I'd built and sort of sold two businesses, and so I was able to add on with some very real world advice about building teams, structuring your business for sale, and I had a lot of good things to share, which people wanted to hear. So it wasn't that difficult to find an audience
Mhm.
and start sharing the message, right? And a lot of the business owners would reach out to me privately and say, "Hey, could you come and give me some advice on mainly the structure of their business or the structure of their teams, especially the sales team, how they're
Mhm.
compensated and things like that," right? And I found I
Awesome.
really enjoyed that as a kind of a side gig and from my day job. So yeah.
And so, and you currently say you're on a hiatus on from your podcast, but where did Profit Powerhouse come from?
Yeah. So Yeah, this is funny. So, like I'm always try to be brutally honest, right? And so, honestly, like the truth of it is that I started going on the podcast to promote the book, and I realized that actually love the sound of my own voice, right? And so, although some people do not, right? And I was strangely enough, since I've been 17 years old, I've also been a DJ, right? And so, I've always been had an affinity to talking on microphones and things like that. And, I'm able to get podcast appearances, sort of ad hoc when I apply
Yeah.
to other people's shows, and but I can't control that, right? And so then I decided, hey, if I have my own show, then I can at least talk once a week, right?
Mhm.
And so that was kind of it. Started on other people's shows, and then I thought, you know what, I think I have a consistent, repeatable sort of message that I want to share, and then I think there's enough there for my own show, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, and so just before leaving the private equity, moving to Florida and all that, I had about 30 episodes down and published, and I'm just now taking a brief break while I get settled and and I get settled in my new business and all that, and then hopefully in the spring I'll get going again on
I, lo-
recording episodes.
I love that. So talk to us a little bit. Who are your guests? Who the people which kind of listen to it, and what is the podcast all about?
Yeah, so mainly I'm trying to, talk to entrepreneurs that are, either just started a business or, have some modicum of success, but not super huge 9-figure businesses, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm trying to relate to the guy who or gal that wants to quit their job and start their own company, and break out on their own, and they're really kind of at that point of being, I have my 9 to 5 and I have this dream and I can't get from here to there. And how do I do it? Right. And I want to share those stories of how people built and sold and grew and, businesses and made that shift from, armchair entrepreneur to actual entrepreneur kind of thing.
I love that. And if our listeners haven't done so, you guys need to go and check out Mr. Glenn Poulos. And also, you need to check out his website. And not only that, you guys got to go over and check out his podcast called Profitable Powerhouse, because there's some really tactical stuff in there you teach all the time. And you have this humor in it. So if people listen to your podcast, you have a very humorous and you always have people laughing. So talk to us a little bit. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I don't know. I guess I've always been a joker, but I found that the best way to teach the salespeople, especially, was through the funny stories. And because oftentimes people can remember the punchline, but they can't really remember the whole joke. But if you can remember the punchline, you can actually take a minute and reflect back and remember the rule that goes behind it, right? And so rather than just tell dry stories, I try to tell stories that have oh my God, I can't believe the story you told about this, or that, or whatever, and and then the lessons don't get forgotten, right?
Mhm.
And I try to give them a name that they can latch onto, and things like that, right? But I find that humor is one of the best ways of building rapport,
Mhm.
and I think building rapport is the backbone of building a relationship with your customer. Yeah. So
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that, because we all want to buy people from which are like us, and you want to buy from people which you kind of relate to. So I couldn't agree with you more than what the way you looked at going out there and having people sell. So I absolutely love that. And by the way, I just looked at the clock. I can talk to you forever. But before we um, talk to you forever, talk to us a little bit. Where do you feel the future is going in sales? Where's the future going in and how you want to speak? How is the future going with powerful powerhouse you have? So talk to us a little bit. Where do you see this whole thing going? Where do you want to go? And maybe give us a little bit of glimpse behind the scenes on what you're currently working on.
sure. So where I sort of see it going is I often explain to people the difference between sales and marketing. And for me, sales is when you're in front of the customer, you're selling the
Yeah.
product, you're asking for the order, you're getting the business, and or maybe demonstrating the product, something like that, right? You're literally face to face with the customer. That's really selling. Everything else to me is marketing, right? And so the way I see it evolving, and often have debates with people about this and what have you, and because a lot of, especially some of the younger guys, are like, oh, I could do it all from my desk, and I could do Zoom calls and this and that. I'm like, no, the stuff I'm selling is like $50,000 instruments, electronic precision instruments. They don't sell themselves over the internet. Like, if you don't show up, your competitor's there, trust me. And so
Yeah.
what's changing is that a lot of automation and AI and things like that can be built into the marketing side of the business, generating the leads and culling your customers and keeping your lists up to date. And there's just a litany of things now. The tools are coming out like 20 a day on what you can do to automate your sales process and things like that.
Mhm.
But what I focus on is how to get in front of the customer, stay in front of the customer, and act in front of the customer.
Mhm.
And as I said before, and be a pleasure to do business with. So I'm trying to explain to people that it's yes, AI is coming. Yes, it's automating so many parts of it, but it
Mhm.
can't automate the piece where you go to the customer, you show up at that appropriate moment, and that's your time to show your product and figure out what's going on, right? And I have a litany of rules in the book on why I believe in that and why I follow them and how I follow them. But sort of, so I see the exciting time right now. I'm really quite geeked out over AI myself. I use
Mhm.
all the tools, the graphic tools, the video tools, the chat GPTs. I use it all, right? I love it.
Mhm.
Love every minute of it. But that doesn't change when I have to get out of my chair and go and visit the customer and figure out where we stand in the pecking order in the food chain, right?
Yeah.
And so so I built a company in Canada, Gap Wireless, from zero in 2007 to $84 million when I sold it
That's amazing.
in 2022. And what I did was I bought a very small business in Florida that's been around for quite a while that does a similar thing, selling a similar kinds of products, but in a different country to a different customer base. But basically, this business runs the same. And
Mhm.
so I didn't have to relearn, how the business runs, right? I mean, I'm not running a manufacturing operation or something like that, right? It's a sales company, and it's just some new customers. And now I'm trying to take all these new modern, marketing tools and bring them to bear on this existing company and see if I can help grow it and see if I can, do it one more time before I retire. And that's kind of what I'm working on. And the biggest change that I see coming, as I'm saying, is around the technology that
Mhm.
drives the sales, but it's also in every other department in the business.
Yeah.
AI is serving the finance team, the contracts team. Everybody's using it, and I'm excited to deploy those tools. But still, I always stress to people, like, don't kid yourself that you can't sell high ticket. It's like, imagine trying to sell some guy a $50 million jet and saying you can't go for a flight, right? A test flight, right? Oh, we'll show you it on Teams. We'll
Oh,
take you on a virtual flight,
you
right?
gotta love the virtual tour, and this is how you get in
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
I,
No, that's not going to work, right?
I love that, and I'm a big user of AI, but I'm also trying to stay very humble about it, because if
Yeah,
I write emails in a certain way, and when I meet people in person, I'm like you, I think people or business needs to be done in person. If they meet you and they don't sound like that, they they
yeah,
wonder what's up with that. So it still needs to be you. And so for me,
yeah.
I absolutely love that. So, and as I promised you, so I have my three takeaways, and I want to just say thank you for giving so freely off the gift of your time. And so for me, customer number one, I absolutely love that. The second one was, you know what? When you employ and when you have people work for you, have them sit beside you and not in front of you at the desk. I absolutely love that rule where you had them sit right next to you. That's awesome. And then the final rule for me was, hey, don't be left behind, because what you teaching is really, hey, you want to stay in front of it and you don't want to be left behind. So for me, those are my 3 takeaways. So with that, Glenn, before we start or finish off, I want to see if you're open to play what we call
Sure.
Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition. That's
Yeah.
our greatest, accomplishment yet here. But before we do, tell our listeners a little bit, how can they learn more about you? How can they find out more about you? And then how you could be reached?
Yeah. So if you go to glennpoulos.com, you can reach me on my website and click through the book and my social media and stuff. But the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. I have articles almost every day. I'm a LinkedIn top voice. So I'm very, very active on LinkedIn, and you can connect with me there. We can collaborate and look for opportunities to, collaborate on different things or what have you. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And there's more information on the show notes, and there's some additional takeaways on the show notes. And then also you guys got to check out what he does. So with that, are you up for Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition? So the way this works is
sir.
I have 25 questions. I ask you for a number, and you give me as quickly as you can the answer. And the answer is always the same: yes and or no, and why. So you up for it?
Okay. Yes, sir.
With that, Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition. So we do about 5-6 questions. So give me a number between 1 and 25.
How about 3? Number 3.
3 is awesome. So is it okay to serve a cocktail in a cereal bowl to mess with your customer? Yes or no, and why?
I would say no, and the reason why is because there's nothing for him to relate it to. Like, I don't see how there's a win in it for you, and it just is too bizarre. I don't know. It just, yeah.
I go with that. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
Okay, so how about 22?
22. Okay. Would you ever deep fry a salad just to see what happens? Yes or no, and why?
Well, living in the yes, and because in the US they deep fry everything, and so I think it's definitely worth the experiment. Would I ever do it twice? The answer is probably no.
So, to all of our US customers out there, we don't fry everything. We fry almost everything, not everything. Okay, give me a number between 1 and 25.
16.
16. Is cooking with a soda pop a culinary crime or a genius? Yes or no, and why?
So cooking with soda pop. I would say no. I don't think so. I'm not. I just can't. I'm grasping to see if there was some sort of chemical way of flambeing soda pop and having it make it work. But I'm going to go with no, because I'm not sure it would work.
Okay, we appreciate it. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
9.
9. Is it okay to deep fry a milkshake just to see what goes wrong? By the way, you have a lot of frying thing going on. Yes or no, or why?
I'm going to say no to that, because I feel like it might be dangerous putting a milkshake would be cold because it has ice cream, and then putting the cold in the hot, you probably have an explosion. So no, I'm going hard no. Hard no.
So it's okay to do in Canada. It's not okay to do it in the US.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you another number between 1 and 25.
How about number 1?
Ooh, number 1. So that's an oldie but goodie. Pineapple on the pizza. Yes or no, and why?
So the answer is yes, because a lot of people would eat it. But if you're asking me what I put, it would be no. As a matter of fact, when I was interviewing for my wife, the first question I would ask them was, order a pizza. And they're like, what do you mean, order a pizza? And I'd say, pretend I'm the pizza place. Hello. And tell me what you want on your pizza. Right. And they'd say, oh, I'll have a Hawaiian. I go, okay, we can't date. And I just don't get along with people that eat Hawaiian pizza. But it's a lovely combination that I know a lot of people love. So yes, pizza. Yes, pineapple on a pizza.
So I think he's politically correct. There's a whole movement of getting the pineapple off the pizza. So last question. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
I'll go with 19.
19. Ooh, should more dishes be named after people executives? Like reverse dining. Yes or no, and why?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part. So I just,
So,
yeah.
so should more dishes be named like
Um,
executives? Like, ooh, this is reverse dining. Yes or no, and why?
Oh, I'm gonna say yes, sure. I mean, I think you can be creative in the naming of the dishes, but let's not get too crazy on how you cook them. So that's the best answer I
I
have for that
I'm
one.
with you, and I'm not sure where reverse timing comes in as an exec. So with that, thanks for
Yeah,
playing rapid fire question
yeah,
food service edition. So
awesome.
I have to again, I enjoyed this conversation. We need to do a 2.0 of that. I really appreciate you sharing so freely of your history and from sales to owning a business, starting it at zero, and selling it well and into the 80s. Hey, you wrote a book. Hey, you went into a total different field and you have a podcast. That's absolutely amazing. So give us your final words of wisdom for anybody who is interested in doing something new.
So the my advice for that is always the same: is that you know there's always this fear of starting a business, right? And
Yep.
and leading up to the moment of when you quit your job, say, so you can be a full-time entrepreneur, is like just a paralyzing fear, right? But what people don't realize is like they think that that sort of fear will perpetuate, but the reality is that you're just one step away from a different fear, which is much more motivating, because you got to get over that fear of quitting your job, because once you quit your job, the fear of being poor will motivate you much more than your fear of what's going to happen when you quit the job. So you just need to take that final step, because once you do, you're going to be so motivated to be successful that you won't have time to be scared, right? And
Um,
so a lot, and I was just blessed with an ability that, to take those risks a little bit easier, and so I find that to be a blessing. But if you have, an opportunity to to start a business or acquire a business, just do it. And they're not all going to be successful,
mhm.
but that doesn't have to be the end of it either, right? You can have something, and from lots of entrepreneurs out there, they've done dozens of things and they're not all home runs, but just
Mhm.
do it. Just take that final step and commit to it, and try to have 6 to 12 months of at least emergency money on side, so you can at least feed your family. But then
Mhm.
just give it your all, and that's
I
my
love that.
my
That's
advice.
really good advice. So thank you again for being here today. Thanks for sharing so freely of all the things you have to overcome in order to get to where you are. But I appreciate you. And to our listeners, remember to disrupt your kitchen, fire up your career, stay hungry for change. I'm Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show, and I'm here with Glenn, and we are out of here. So with that, go out there, beat the challenge, and be the chef who sets the world on fire, and not with putting a milkshake in it like Glenn wants to do. So with that, Glenn, I really appreciate you being here today. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris.
Really appreciate it. And to our listeners, hey, bon appetit and go out there. Stay disruptive, everybody. Thanks.